Picture this, an enormous plant where conveyor belts hum around the clock, robotic arms swirl vats of dough large enough to fill entire swimming pools, and row after row of hot ovens pump out thousands of perfect loaves every hour. It sounds like a sci-fi fantasy. But for massive bread factories worldwide, it's a daily routine. The sheer scale of these operations can be hard to comprehend until you see the bread lining shelves in every grocery store, corner shop, and gas station in your neighborhood. Yet underneath this efficient marvel lies a world of complexity and, at times, controversy. From the unknown origin of some of the ingredients to whispers about over-reliance on chemicals, these mega-bakeries stir questions about quality, ethics, and the drive for ever higher profits. Are they using state-of-the-art techniques for the betterment of society, or are we simply trading tradition and nutrition for convenience and cost-cutting? Today, we'll explore exactly how millions of loaves get produced, packaged, and shipped, uncovering surprising secrets behind those golden brown crusts many of us take for granted. Bread is one of humanity's oldest foods, with roots tracing back thousands of years. In ancient times, grains were ground by hand and dough was kneaded in small batches before being baked in communal ovens or simple hearths. For centuries, the smell of rising dough was associated with home kitchens and local bakeries, not colossal factories. But as urban populations boomed and people demanded more, a shift started to occur. In the 19th century, steam-powered mills made flour cheaper and more plentiful than ever. Then came the Industrial Revolution, which introduced mechanical kneaders and larger, more efficient ovens. By the mid-20th century, the stage was set for bread making on a scale once unimaginable. Factories transformed flour, water, yeast, and salt into towering stacks of bread at a pace that rivaled any other mass-produced product. Yet, for many, this transition signaled not just progress, but a departure from age-old traditions. Gone were the intimate handmade processes. In came schedules, rigid production lines, and an unrelenting drive to crank out loaves faster, cheaper, and in uniform shapes. Some saw this as a practical necessity. After all, feeding the world's growing populations demands efficiency. Others worried that something vital might be lost when bread shifted from local art form to global commodity. From the earliest examples of mechanized bakeries to the sophisticated mega factories we see today, it's clear that bread has become far more than a simple staple. It's big business, fueled by modern technology and shaped by the ever-present demand for convenience. But the heart of these operations, the factory floor, remains the place where recipes, machines, and human labor converge to churn out millions of loaves in a continuous cycle. To understand just how that happens, we need to step beyond the store shelves and peer into the mechanical heart of a modern bread empire. Any visitor stepping into a massive bread factory for the first time is likely to be overwhelmed by the scale. Picture a cavernous building with ceiling-high silos filled with flour, automatically piping this key ingredient toward massive mixers in carefully measured amounts. Unlike small artisanal setups that might rely on a baker's intuition, here everything is calculated down to the last gram. Computers control the proportions of flour, water, yeast, and dough conditioners, ensuring each batch meets precise consistency and texture standards. Once the ingredients are dispensed, giant mixers spin at rapid speeds, kneading enough dough to bake thousands of loaves at a time. Many factories operate non-stop, which means these mixers keep churning through the day and well into the night, commanding huge amounts of electricity and manpower, though as we'll see later, that manpower is increasingly replaced by robotic precision. If you look at the labels on store-bought bread, you'll often see a long list of ingredients beyond the classic quartet of flour, water, yeast, and salt. Stabilizers, emulsifiers, and sometimes sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup might appear. Officially, these additives make dough more manageable and help produce a softer, fluffier texture, something many consumers expect from store-bought brands. However, rumors abound that some factories push the envelope, using lesser-known chemicals to speed production times or extend shelf life. While most reputable bakeries maintain standards that comply with local and international regulations, whispers occasionally surface that certain operations aren't so transparent. People claim that once you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of loaves a day, corners can be cut. Disgruntled former employees sometimes talk about suspicious shipments of unlabeled powders or questionable cost-saving substitutes. Separating fact from fiction isn't always easy, particularly when proprietary recipes are guarded trade secrets. Yet, despite the rumors, many experts argue that the real magic of a giant bread factory lies in its efficiency. When done right, automation ensures minimal wastage of raw materials, and large-scale ovens bake more loaves using less energy than smaller separate ovens would. It's a stunning synergy of machinery and method that can keep store shelves stocked and prices competitive. But what happens to that freshly kneaded dough after it's mixed remains one of the most mesmerizing parts of the process. From the mixers, workers, or sometimes mechanical arms, guide huge batches of dough onto conveyor belts for the next phase, shaping and portioning. In seconds, sophisticated machines cut and weigh lumps of dough with uncanny accuracy, ensuring each piece matches the bakery's exact standard for weight. Rollers then press the dough into uniform shapes or mold it to specific types: baguettes, sandwich loaves, burger buns, whatever's on the production schedule for that day. Next, those neatly portioned dough pieces move along the belt to massive proofing chambers. Inside these temperature and humidity controlled rooms, the dough is allowed to rest and rise. Think of it like a spa for yeast. Warm, moist air fosters fermentation, making the dough expand. In some ultra-modern facilities, sensors track each tray's internal temperature and consistency, adjusting conditions on the fly. If the dough rises too quickly or too slowly, the entire sequence can be thrown off, resulting in loaves of the wrong shape or texture. However, this step has also become a flashpoint of controversy. Traditional bakers argue that dough needs ample time to develop flavor and character, a process sometimes referred to as slow fermentation. Industrial-scale bakeries, by contrast, often run on rigid timelines. They might use specialized ingredients that accelerate fermentation or maintain higher temperatures in the proofing chambers to get bread out the door faster. Critics claim this compromises both taste and nutritional value, fueling an ongoing debate about whether factory bread is truly healthy or just a fluffy imitation. As soon as the dough finishes proofing, conveyor belts whisk it into towering banks of ovens, each capable of holding thousands of loaves at once. Thanks to advanced control panels, every aspect of the baking process, temperature, steam injection, baking duration, follows a meticulously crafted program designed to yield consistent results. When the bread emerges, it's quickly cooled on extended racks or spirals. Within minutes, Each loaf is typically scanned for imperfections. Those that don't measure up, maybe slightly misshapen or underweight, get set aside for other uses, crumbs, animal feed, or donation in some cases. The efficiency is astounding, but so are the underlying questions about what factories might add or do behind the scenes to keep everything flowing at top speed. Which leads us to one of the biggest sources of tension in modern bread making: preservatives, chemicals, and the backlash from health-conscious consumers. Check the ingredient list on a typical supermarket loaf and you'll see more than a handful of unfamiliar terms: calcium propionate, sorbic acid, mono and diglycerides, and other things that sound more at home in a science lab than a bakery. Many of these agents preserve freshness, fend off mold, or enhance texture so the bread remains soft for a week or more. In an age where convenience rules, that's a powerful selling point. No one wants to buy a loaf today only to see it sprout green fuzz tomorrow. However, certain consumer advocacy groups aren't so enthusiastic. They argue that these additives might pose unknown long-term health risks or disrupt gut health. Online, you'll find heated discussions about how bleached flours or chemical-laden bread could impact everything from digestive issues to overall well-being. Some critics label it fear-mongering, pointing out that food regulations in most countries are strict and that bread factories follow guidelines to ensure safety. Yet concerns persist. In some regions, calls to ban specific chemicals have ramped up. For instance, potassium bromate, once a common dough improver, faced bans or warnings in various parts of the world due to studies linking it to potential health hazards. Meanwhile, a wave of smaller artisanal bakeries markets clean label bread, free of the artificial preservatives used in large-scale production. They claim these simpler loaves are closer to bread's ancient roots. Mega factories and their allies counter that without such additives, bread prices would skyrocket, shelf life would plummet, and food waste could soar. Consumers, especially those on tight budgets, might suffer the most if factory breads were forced to rely on purely traditional methods. It's a debate that touches on everything from class issues to environmental concerns, revealing just how complicated a simple loaf can become when you produce it by the millions. As if that weren't enough controversy, large-scale bread production has also ruffled feathers in the distribution realm. Giant factories don't just pump out loaves, they ship them across entire nations, or even internationally. The logistics behind that are impressive, but they also raise questions about the balance of power between small bakeries and industry titans. After the bread is baked and cooled, the next step is packaging. Specialized machines wrap loaves in plastic at lightning speed, sometimes slapping on brand labels or barcodes simultaneously. Because bread is perishable, timing is critical. Factories aim to get each fresh loaf on a truck and out to stores as quickly as possible. Automated warehouse systems often coordinate fleets of trucks, mapping routes to ensure that the bread arrives within a specific window for maximum freshness. Large conglomerates that own both bakeries and distribution channels hold a significant advantage. By controlling the supply chain from flour procurement to supermarket shelves, they can optimize efficiency and minimize costs. Smaller bakeries, unable to match this scale, often struggle to keep up. Critics argue this leads to a near monopoly in certain regions, driving independent producers out of business or forcing them to operate on razor-thin margins. Rumors of behind-the-scenes dealings, like exclusive contracts that lock stores into purchasing from a single factory, occasionally surface. Some local bakers claim they can't compete with the massive factory's capacity to supply fresh loaves daily at a lower price. Consumers, faced with convenience and low cost, often choose the factory loaf over a more expensive, artisanal option. This dynamic shapes bread markets worldwide, potentially homogenizing our tastes and narrowing our options. Amid the hustle, brand wars emerge. Major bread companies push eye-catching packaging, slogans like "baked fresh daily" or claims of 100% natural, while critics question whether mass-produced loaves can ever truly be artisanal or fresh. Meanwhile, promotional deals and discounts ensure that factory bread remains a budget-friendly staple, an undeniable draw for families. But for those who look deeper, it raises a question. Are we sacrificing craftsmanship and flavor at the altar of cost and convenience? Still, none of these mammoth factories could run without the human element, whether it's operating the machinery, overseeing quality control, or driving trucks for distribution. Workers are integral to keeping these bread lines moving. The nature of that work, especially in an era of increasing automation, sparks its own set of ethical dilemmas. The classic image of a baker covered in flour, kneading dough by hand at dawn, barely applies in a mega factory. Instead, thousands of loaves come together under the watchful eye of managers, technicians, and quality control specialists. Human workers often handle tasks that require quick judgment or specialized knowledge, though many once manual chores, like repetitive kneading or lifting heavy dough, have been handed over to machines. Proponents argue that automation reduces workplace injuries and frees human employees to focus on higher-level tasks like flavor innovation or problem-solving when equipment malfunctions. However, some workers fear for their job security as machines become increasingly sophisticated. Where a factory once needed hundreds of hands to keep production running smoothly, new systems might require only a handful of highly trained staff to monitor screens and calibrate machinery. There's also the issue of working conditions. Some critics allege that because bread must be baked around the clock, shift work can be grueling. Night shifts, minimal breaks, and repetitive tasks can wear down employees. Labor advocates worry that large factories might exploit low-wage workers or rely heavily on temporary staff during peak seasons. Anonymous claims sometimes pop up online, describing physically demanding environments or managers who push staff to meet unrealistic quotas. On the flip side, factories that adhere to stringent labor regulations typically highlight their investment in employee welfare, offering training, benefits, and stable salaries. Some even provide educational programs, teaching staff about baking science and machine operation, potentially opening career paths to higher-paying specialized roles. Whether these positive stories outweigh the darker rumors is hard to gauge. It largely depends on local labor laws, corporate ethics, and the cultural context. Either way, it's clear that the march of automation is unlikely to reverse course. As machines become smarter and more affordable, mega factories will remain at the cutting edge of mass bread production, perhaps even pushing into entirely new frontiers. If you think the rise of factory bread has been significant so far, the next wave of innovations may leave the bread of today looking quaint by comparison. Even as mega factories dominate the market, they continually evolve. Some forward-thinking operations experiment with alternative grains like quinoa or teff, responding to consumer interest in healthier, more diverse bread. Others incorporate advanced sensors, AI-driven cameras, and real-time analytics to detect imperfections at every stage, from mixing the dough to packaging the final product. If a loaf is underbaked by just a few seconds, the system flags it, sending it down a separate line. Sustainability is another area ripe for development. With climate concerns pressing down, certain factories are looking at ways to reduce their carbon footprints, perhaps by powering machinery with solar or wind energy, or using more biodegradable packaging materials. There's also ongoing research into yeast strains that ferment faster or require fewer resources to maintain quality standards, potentially cutting down on energy-intensive proofing times. Meanwhile, the boom in gluten-free, organic, and artisanal products challenges mega factories to adapt or risk losing market share to smaller businesses that cater to these niches. Some large-scale bakers have launched specialty lines, marketing them as healthier, more wholesome alternatives, though skeptics question whether these lines differ enough from the mainstay of mass-produced bread. Looking even further ahead, experts speculate about the possibility of bread factories integrating with vertical farming complexes that produce their own grains. If flour could be milled on site, it might streamline supply chains and reduce transportation costs. Another futuristic angle involves 3D printed dough, or genetically modified yeast custom designed for specific bread textures. A concept that feels more like science fiction, but may not be as far off as we think. In a sense, the world of industrial bread is at a crossroads. Technological leaps promise efficiency, while consumer consciousness demands accountability and transparency. Whether these factories can reconcile profit motives with ethical, environmental, and health concerns will shape the future of the loaves we buy. For now, the story of mass-produced bread is still unfolding, but one thing is certain: it's an industry that isn't afraid to reinvent itself. After delving into the colossal scale of bread factories, where a flurry of machinery, workers, and carefully timed processes crank out millions of loaves each day, it's clear there's more than meets the eye. What starts with simple ingredients, flour, yeast, water, turns into a tapestry of controversies over chemicals, labor practices, and corporate dominance. We see how sleek automation can yield astonishing efficiency, yet it can also prompt questions about job security and the true quality of our daily bread. In a world where convenience often trumps tradition, these enormous bakeries offer a fast, affordable staple that many people depend on. Yet the presence of preservatives, the potential homogenization of flavors, and whispers of exploitative practices loom over the industry. Some see mega bread factories as a testament to human ingenuity and our ability to feed millions with speed and precision. Others believe these operations stray too far from the artisanal roots that made bread the staff of life in the first place. So what's next? Will consumer demand for healthier, more transparent products drive further innovations, forcing these factories to pivot toward more natural methods? Or will cost and convenience keep factories firmly in the driver's seat? The answer likely lies somewhere in between, where technology, regulation, and market forces collide to shape how we break bread each day. Ultimately, every sliced loaf or dinner roll you pick up in the store has a story behind it. It's a product of well-orchestrated production lines, dedicated workers, and corporate strategies aimed at dominating the global market. With each bite, we're all participants in that story, wittingly or not. As our appetite for quick, affordable bread continues, only time will tell if mega factories can rise to the occasion ethically and sustainably. For now, consider the astonishing journey of your next loaf. Because in the world of industrial bread, each slice is a window into the complexities of modern life, where tradition, technology, and towering ambition come together to form a soft, crispy crust.